Tomorrow I marry a perfect man. But tonight, this locket showed me a memory that wasn't mine. I saw through his eyes, and everything I believed was a lie. The chandeliers of the Grand Elm Hotel ballroom showered the rehearsal dinner in a warm, forgiving light. Crystal glinted, silverware chimed against fine-bone china, and the low hum of well-heeled conversation wrapped around Vivienne Rhodes like a cashmere shawl, expensive, comfortable, and slightly stifling. Beside her, Elliot Quinn placed a reassuring hand over hers on the crisp white linen. His touch was familiar, solid, like the polished oak table beneath them. Safe. Perfect, isn't it? Elliot murmured, his smile reflecting the room's effortless elegance. Just like you planned, Viv. Vivienne returned the smile, the muscles in her cheeks performing the practiced gesture. Almost, she conceded, her gaze sweeping the room, her mother beaming, her father nodding approvingly at Elliot, friends laughing at perfectly timed jokes. The florist confirmed the peonies for tomorrow, ivory, blush, and just a hint of coral. Every detail meticulously curated, a testament to her skill as an event planner and her desire for a life free of the messy, unpredictable chaos that had once defined her. Yet, beneath the surface of this gilded perfection, unease flickered, cold and persistent. It was the ghost at the feast, the spectral presence of Sterling Ward. 7 years vanished, evaporated after that final, brutal argument that still echoed in the quiet moments before sleep. The memory was a jagged piece of shrapnel embedded in her carefully constructed reality. He had left her. He had chosen escape over them, over her. That was the narrative she had clung to, the bedrock of her decision to build something secure, predictable, and utterly unlike the passionate, turbulent whirlwind that had been Sterling. Aunt Agatha, resplendent in vibrant purple silk slightly askew, materialized beside Vivienne's chair, the scent of gin and expensive perfume preceding her. Her eyes, sharp despite the haze of alcohol, missed nothing. "Cold feet, darling?" she whispered conspiratorially, her voice a raspy murmur that cut through the polite chatter. Before Vivienne could protest the absurdity, Agatha pressed something cold and heavy into her palm. "Family heirloom. Tarnished silver, like most truths, eh?" She winked, a gesture both cryptic and unsettling. "They say it grants the wearer just one glimpse, not of the future, pish-posh, of a romantic regret, a pivotal moment, but from the other side." Agatha leaned closer, her breath warm against Vivienne's ear. "Use it wisely, or better yet, don't." With a final pat on Vivienne's clenched fist, she swayed back towards the bar, leaving behind the weight of the locket and a whirlwind of unwelcome possibility. Later, alone in the hushed sanctuary of her dressing room, the locket felt like a brand against Vivienne's skin. The polished perfection of her wedding gown hung nearby, a silent accusation. The ghost of Sterling felt louder here, away from Elliot's steady presence and the ballroom's curated cheer. Why? The question, usually batted away, roared back with newfound force. Why did he leave without a word? What had he truly felt in those final moments? Agatha's words echoed. From the other side. The need wasn't just curiosity, it was a desperate, clawing urge to finally lay the ghost to rest, to confirm the story she'd told herself, that Sterling's choices, his instability, his ultimate abandonment, were the villains of their piece, that she had been blameless, that the pain was solely his doing. Driven by a compulsion stronger than reason, Vivienne unclenched her fist. The locket was unremarkable, tarnished silver, heart-shaped, unadorned. No inscription, no intricate filigree, just cold, heavy metal. Taking a shaky breath, she pressed the tiny catch. It opened with a soft, reluctant click. Warmth bloomed instantly in her palm, radiating from the locket's core. Not the gentle warmth of Elliot's hand, but something deeper, more unsettling, like holding a beating heart plucked raw from a chest. The light in the dressing room dimmed, the scent of her floral perfume vanishing, replaced by damp plaster, stale coffee, and the faint, metallic tang of turpentine. She wasn't Vivienne anymore. She was Sterling. Panic, cold and sharp, flooded her veins. His veins. It was a physical weight pressing down on her chest, making each breath a struggle. She was standing in the cramped, familiar confines of Sterling's old apartment. Rain lashed against the grimy window pane, casting long, distorted shadows. His hands trembled as they arranged cheap pasta on chipped plates. The gesture felt monumental, fraught with a desperate, fragile hope. She'd be here soon, maybe tonight. Maybe she'd finally see the effort, see him. The memory washed over Vivienne Sterling, her own voice, sharp with impatience the last time she'd seen the meager meal. Sterling, honestly? Pasta again? It's a bit pathetic, don't you think? The remembered sting of her dismissal was fresh, a raw wound in his psyche. The sound of the key in the lock was like a gunshot. Vivienne Sterling's heart hammered against his ribs. He turned, forcing a hopeful smile, his eyes searching hers for something. Anything but the frustration he saw tightening her features. Vivienne, trapped within Sterling's perception, saw herself through his eyes. Not the composed event planner, but a younger version, beautiful but brittle, her posture radiating impatience, her gaze sweeping the shabby room with barely concealed disdain. "Long day?" Sterling's voice came out, tight and unnatural. His voice, yet Vivienne heard it as both speaker and listener, layered with her own memory. Her voice cut through the small space, sharp as broken glass, dripping with a frustration that had curdled into something colder. "Don't start, Sterling. Just don't." She tossed her bag onto the sagging sofa. "Another rejection letter?" She gestured vaguely towards the overflowing trash can near his makeshift drafting table, a door laid across 2 filing cabinets. Shame, hot and corrosive, flooded Vivienne Sterling. He looked down at his hands, calloused from menial jobs that barely paid the rent, not from creating the art that consumed him. "It's competitive. But I have new sketches, strong ones." Her sigh was a weapon. "Sketches don't pay bills, Sterling. Dreams don't put food on the table." She paced the small space, her movements jerky, agitated. "When are you going to get serious? Get a real job? Stop chasing this fantasy?" The words struck deeper than Vivienne, observing from within Sterling's shattered consciousness, had ever realized. Each syllable was a lash, tearing away at his fragile sense of worth. He felt exposed, foolish, the hope he'd nurtured over the pathetic pasta shriveling into ash. "It's not a fantasy," he protested, his voice low, thick with the effort of holding back tears. "It's who I am." Her laugh was brittle, humorless. Who you are is someone who can't commit to anything real. You drift, Sterling. You always have. It's exhausting." She stopped pacing, facing him, her eyes hard. "Maybe you'll actually achieve something when you stop dreaming and face reality." The words, her words, Vivienne's words, landed with the force of a physical blow. Vivienne Sterling felt the impact like a sledgehammer to the sternum. All the air rushed from his lungs. The desperate hope vanished, replaced by a crushing wave of utter despair. He saw it then, reflected in her eyes. Not love, not even frustration anymore, but contempt. She saw him as worthless, unlovable, a pathetic dreamer drowning in his own delusions. The conviction solidified, cold and absolute. "She doesn't love me. She never truly did. I was just a distraction, an inconvenient fantasy." The world narrowed to a dark tunnel. The sound of the rain intensified. Numbly, mechanically, Vivienne Sterling moved. He didn't look at her again. He pulled a worn duffel bag from under the bed. He began packing, not clothes for a future, but tokens of a past he was severing. Sketchbooks, charcoal sticks, a single photograph tucked away. His movements were deliberate, devoid of feeling, the actions of a man already gone. He left the apartment key on the small table beside the untouched plates of pasta. He opened the door. The rush of cold, rain-scented air hit him. He stepped out into the downpour, pulling the door shut behind him with a final, hollow click. He didn't look back. He walked away into the gray sheets of rain, carrying nothing but the shattering certainty that she hadn't loved him, and the unbearable weight of his own perceived failure. The vision snapped. Vivienne gasped, doubling over as if punched, back in her elegant dressing room. The warmth of the locket was gone, replaced by its original cold heaviness. She was on her knees, tears streaming down her face unchecked, hot and shameful. Sobs racked her body, violent and uncontrollable. The taste of bile rose in her throat. The polished reflection in the full-length mirror showed a stranger, mascara smudged like bruises, face contorted in agony. The meticulously planned wedding, Elliot's steady love, the safe future, it all receded, drowned out by the raw, screaming truth echoing in the silence. She had been the villain, not Sterling. Her words, dripping with contempt, had been the killing blow. Her inability to see his desperate hope, his fragile offering, had driven the knife. Her narrative of abandonment was a lie, carefully constructed to shield herself from the devastating reality of her own cruelty and profound misunderstanding. She had rewritten history, casting herself as the victim, while Sterling walked away believing himself fundamentally unlovable. The weight of that realization, the crushing burden of her own culpability, pressed down on her with physical force. The ghost hadn't been laid to rest. It had risen, monstrous and undeniable, wearing her own face. The gilded cage of her perfect life had just been utterly, irrevocably shattered by the unvarnished truth held within a tarnished silver heart. Dawn seeped through the silk curtains of Vivienne's bridal suite, painting the room in a sickly gray light that matched the hollow ache within her. She hadn't slept. The ghostly echo of her own voice, "Maybe you'll actually achieve something," and the visceral memory of Sterling's shattering despair played on a relentless loop behind her eyes. The tarnished locket lay cold on the nightstand, a silent witness to the ruin it had wrought. Her meticulously planned future, the safe harbor of Elliot's love, felt like a gilded cage built on a lie. Her lie. The phone rang, shrill and insistent. Her mother, no doubt, confirming hair and makeup. Vivienne stared at it, her hand trembling. Taking a shuddering breath that felt like inhaling shards of glass, she picked up. "Mom, I need you to cancel everything. The morning prep, all of it." Her voice was a raw scrape against her throat. Silence, then a bewildered, "Vivienne? What on earth? Are you ill? Is it Elliot?" "No, not Elliot. It's—" How could she explain the inexplicable? "Something happened, something about Sterling, from a long time ago. I have to find him. I have to talk to him." The words sounded insane even to her own ears. Her mother's voice sharpened with alarm. "Sterling? Vivienne, that boy vanished years ago. He broke your heart. What could possibly—" "He didn't break my heart, Mom," Vivienne interrupted, the truth bitter on her tongue. "I broke his, and I need to tell him I'm sorry." She hung up before the storm of disbelief and disapproval could fully break. The next call was harder. Elliot arrived minutes later, his face etched with concern that rapidly morphed into confusion, then dawning horror as he took in her ravaged appearance, the untouched wedding gown, the cold locket. "Viv, talk to me, what's going on?" He reached for her, but she flinched, the gesture suddenly unbearable. She couldn't tell him about the locket's magic, not really. "Aunt Agatha gave me something, an heirloom. It showed me the past, Sterling's past, our last fight," from his side. She swallowed hard, meeting his bewildered gaze. "I was wrong, Elliot, so terribly wrong. Cruel. I drove him away. He left believing I didn't love him." Tears welled again. "I have to find him. I owe him the truth. I owe myself this. I can't marry you carrying this lie." Elliot recoiled as if struck. The steady warmth in his eyes flickered and died, replaced by a profound hurt. He ran a hand through his hair, the picture of stability suddenly looking lost. "Find him? Vivienne, he's been gone for 7 years. He could be anywhere. Dead even." He paced, frustration warring with pain. "This is madness. Driven by what?" A trinket? A hallucination? It was real, Elliot, Vivienne whispered, clutching the locket. More real than anything I've felt in years. He stopped pacing, turning to face her. His voice was quiet, dangerously controlled. Is this about him, or is it about you? The woman who just realized she rewrote her entire history to make herself the blameless victim? He gestured around the opulent suite, the symbol of her curated life. Is this safe, predictable future suddenly not enough now that you see your own reflection clearly? The question struck like a physical blow, echoing the locket's brutal honesty. It stung because it held a sliver of truth. Was this quest purely for Sterling? Or was it an escape from the suffocating weight of her own self-deception? She didn't know. She only knew she couldn't stand still. I have to go, she said, her voice gaining a sliver of steel. I'm sorry, Elliot, more sorry than you can know, but I have to try. He looked at her for a long, agonizing moment, the man who represented security and certainty crumbling before her eyes. Finally, he nodded, a single curt movement. Then go, he said, his voice flat, devoid of its usual warmth. But Vivienne, don't expect everything to be waiting for you if you come back. He turned and walked out, the click of the door sounding like the end of a life. The flight to London was a blur of aching regret and frantic planning. Vivienne clutched the locket in her pocket, its cold weight a constant reminder of the truth that had upended her world. Aunt Agatha's cryptic warning echoed in her mind. The locket shows truth, Vivienne, not futures, and its magic is spent. What you do with the truth is your burden now. The burden felt immense, crushing. London greeted her with a persistent drizzle and indifferent gray skies, mirroring her internal landscape, armed only with fragmented memories. Sterling mentioning Covent Garden artists, a vague dream of illustrating children's books, a possible shared flat near Camden years before he vanished. Her search began. It was an exercise in futility. Old friends, tracked down through fading connections, offered sympathy but no leads. Lost touch, sorry. Heard he went abroad? Always was a bit of a drifter, wasn't he? Camden yielded nothing but unfamiliar faces and shuttered buildings. Covent Garden's bustling energy felt alien, overwhelming. Days bled into each other, marked by cheap hotel rooms, greasy spoon cafes, and the gnawing dread that Agatha was right. The truth was a burden without redemption, a sentence she had to carry alone. Her expensive suitcase, packed for a honeymoon, felt like a cruel joke. Driven by desperation, she tracked down the address of Sterling's last known studio, a dilapidated building in Shoreditch, now sporting a sleek, tech hub coming soon banner. The ground floor housed a surly super behind a plexiglass window. Ward? The man grunted, barely looking up from his tabloid. Artist bloke? Yeah, had the top floor loft. Years ago. Paid on time. Quiet. Left sudden-like. Didn't leave a forwarding address. Building got bought out, cleared everything. Gone. He slammed the plexiglass shut. Defeat pressed down, heavy and cold. Vivienne stood on the wet pavement, staring up at the blank windows where Sterling's dreams had once lived, where she had killed them. He's gone, truly gone, and you're chasing a ghost. Agony twisted inside her, sharp and suffocating. Where else? Who else? A name surfaced, dredged from the silt of old arguments. Mrs. Dubois, Sterling's landlady from his Camden days. Vivienne had met her once, a formidable, sharp-eyed woman who'd complained about paint on the stairs. Sterling had described her as a dragon guarding her hoard, but with a soft spot if you paid rent early. Could she still be there? It was a threadbare hope. The Camden address led to a narrow, terraced house, its paint peeling but defiantly occupied. Vivienne knocked, her heart pounding against her ribs. After an interminable wait, the door creaked open, revealing a woman who seemed carved from London fog and disapproval. Thin, frail, but with eyes like flint. Mrs. Dubois, older, more wrinkled, but unmistakable. Yes? The voice was as sharp as Vivienne remembered. Mrs. Dubois? My name is Vivienne Rhodes. I was a friend of Sterling Ward's. Years ago. I was wondering if you might know, if you have any idea where he might be now? Vivienne poured every ounce of her desperation into her voice. The old woman's eyes narrowed, sweeping over Vivienne's expensive, rain-spattered coat, the shadows under her eyes. "Friend?" she sniffed. "Haven't heard that name in years. Caused enough trouble, that one. Broke the lease, left without a by your leave. Messy business." Vivienne flinched. "I know, I'm trying to find him, to apologize." The raw honesty surprised even her. "Please, if you know anything at all." Mrs. Dubois studied her for a long, silent moment. The hostility in her gaze softened fractionally, replaced by a keen, assessing look. She saw the genuine distress, the tear tracks barely concealed. "Apologize. Bit late for that, isn't it?" But she didn't close the door. "He left London. After things went bad." She paused, her gaze turning inward. "Had a bad time of it, he did. Came back once, though, year or so after he scarpered." Vivienne's breath hitched. "He came back?" Hope, treacherous and fragile, sparked. "He came back? Here? When?" Mrs. Dubois waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, not here. Back to London. Stayed a week, maybe. Looked like death warmed over. Haunted." She shook her head. "Asked me a strange question then, out of the blue. 'Mrs. D,' he says, 'how long do you think a heart can hold a grudge?' Brooding on something he was." She looked pointedly at Vivienne. "Then he was gone again. Off to wherever." How long can a heart hold a grudge? The question echoed Vivienne's own torment. "Do you know where he went after that? Where he is now?" Vivienne pressed, her voice trembling. The landlady shrugged. "Sends a postcard now and then. Not often. Signed with just a fancy S. From all over. Barcelona, Berlin, Kyoto last year, I think. Never says much. Never says where he is." She eyed Vivienne shrewdly. "Heard a rumor, though, down the pub. Mrs. Henderson's nephew works in publishing. Said he saw Sterling's picture in some arty magazine, under a different name. Something Vale? Leo Vale? Leo Vale." The name meant nothing, yet everything. A pen name. Sterling had reinvented himself. Vivienne's pulse raced. "Publishing? What kind of publishing?" "Comic books, I think he said. Graphic novels. Fancy picture books for adults." Mrs. Dubois sniffed again, clearly unimpressed. "Supposedly quite successful. Lives quiet-like, outside the city somewhere. That's all I know." It was more than Vivienne had dared hope for. "Thank you, Mrs. Dubois. Thank you so much." The old woman just nodded, her gaze lingering on Vivienne's face. "Truth can be a heavy thing, girl," she said cryptically before slowly closing the door. "Heavier than regret sometimes." Fueled by this new lead, Vivienne became a woman possessed. A frantic internet search in a noisy internet cafe confirmed it. Leo Vale was a critically acclaimed graphic novelist. His haunting, emotionally resonant artwork graced bestsellers. His bio was sparse. "Leo Vale lives a reclusive life in the English countryside." His publisher, Inkwell Press, had offices near Holborn. Vivienne marched into Inkwell Press the next morning, the picture of determined chaos amidst the sleek, professional calm. Ignoring startled receptionists, she demanded to see whoever handled Leo Vale. Her desperation must have been palpable, because she was eventually ushered into the office of a harried-looking editor named Miles. "Rhodes, please," Miles said, adjusting his glasses, clearly wary. "We value Mr. Vale's privacy immensely. He doesn't give interviews, doesn't do public appearances." "I'm not a journalist," Vivienne said, her voice cracking. "I'm an old friend, from before he was Leo Vale, before London. I need to see him. It's vitally important. Please." She poured out a fraction of her story, a misunderstanding, years of regret, the desperate need to apologize. She didn't mention the locket, but the raw pain in her eyes was undeniable. Miles sighed, rubbing his temples. "Look, I shouldn't, but he has been different lately, more withdrawn than usual, maybe. He scribbled an address on a notepad. It's a cottage near Aylesbury. Don't tell him I gave you this, and for heaven's sake be discreet. He values his solitude. The train ride felt interminable. The taxi from Aylesbury station wound through lush, rain-slicked country lanes. Vivienne rehearsed her apology, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Sterling. I know, I'm so sorry. The cottage appeared exactly as she imagined Sterling's haven would be. Charming, slightly ramshackle, ivy-climbing stone walls, nestled amidst green fields. Smoke curled invitingly from the chimney, her breath caught. She paid the taxi, asking it to wait at the end of the lane, suddenly terrified. Gathering her courage, she approached the front garden gate of the cottage. Through the large rain-streaked window she saw him. Sterling Ward, older, yes. Lines etched around his eyes that hadn't been there before. His dark hair slightly longer, threaded with silver. He was leaner, but carried a quiet solidity he'd lacked in his younger, struggling days. Yet, the air of profound sadness Aunt Agatha had hinted at was palpable even from a distance. He sat in a worn armchair by a crackling fire, a sketchbook open on his lap. He wasn't drawing. He was staring into the flames, a deep, quiet melancholy etched onto his features. The sight of him, so real, so close after 7 years of absence and guilt, was almost overwhelming. Then, movement. An elegant woman emerged from what must be the kitchen, carrying 2 steaming mugs. She was polished, professional, her dark hair sleek, her posture confident. She handed Sterling a mug, her touch lingering briefly on his shoulder. She said something, smiling gently. Sterling looked up at her, a flicker of something. Gratitude? Warmth? Passing over his face before the melancholy settled back in. They looked comfortable, intimate, sharing a quiet moment in his sanctuary. Vivienne's world tilted. The fragile hope that had carried her across an ocean and through days of searching shattered like dropped glass. He's moved on. The realization was a physical blow, stealing her breath. Of course he had. 7 years, a successful life, a beautiful companion. Her quest, her desperate need to unburden her guilt, was a selfish intrusion. She was too late. Agatha's warning rang in her ears. What you do with the truth is your burden now. Tears blurred her vision, hot and humiliating. She couldn't knock, couldn't shatter his peace with her unwanted truth. What good would her apology do now, except reopen old wounds for him? She had caused enough pain. Turning away, her legs weak, she stumbled back down the path towards the waiting taxi, the cold rain mingling with her tears. She fumbled for her phone, hands shaking violently, and dialed Elliot's number. Defeat tasted like ashes. Elliot? Her voice was a broken whisper. I found him. He's happy. With someone else. A sob escaped. I was too late. I'm coming home. I'm so sorry. For everything. Before Elliot could respond, a voice cut through the drizzle. Girl, wait! Vivienne turned. Mrs. Dubois, of all people, was hurrying down the lane, leaning heavily on a sturdy walking stick, a look of fierce determination on her face. She must have taken a later train, followed her concern. You didn't knock, did you? Mrs. Dubois panted, reaching her. No, Vivienne choked out, wiping her face uselessly. I saw. He's with someone. He's happy. I can't. Bah, that's Sarah. Mrs. Dubois snapped. His agent, sharp as a tack, keeps him working and fed. Good soul, been trying to get him out of his shell for years. She fixed Vivienne with her flinty gaze. Never seen him look at her like that, though. Not once. She rummaged in her large, worn handbag and thrust a faded, water-stained postcard into Vivienne's hand. Found this cleaning out an old drawer, meant to show you. Vivienne looked down. The postcard depicted a painting of the old stone bridge in her hometown, their bridge where they'd shared countless stolen kisses and whispered dreams. Her heart stopped. The date stamp was clear. just 18 months after Sterling had vanished. The message, written in Sterling's familiar looping script, was brief but devastating. Still see her face on this bridge. Does the heart forget, or just learn to carry the weight? He had come back. For her. Not long after leaving London the first time, Vivienne stared, stunned. "He was here," Mrs. Dubois said quietly, her voice losing its sharp edge. "Looking for you. About a year after he left. Scraped himself together somehow. Stayed a week. Haunted the places you used to go. Saw you one day," he said, laughing, bright, walking with some suited fellow near your office. He thought. Mrs. Dubois sighed, a sound like dry leaves. "He thought you'd moved on, happily, found the stability you always wanted. Broke him all over again, it did. Left the next day, never came back." The pieces slammed together with brutal clarity. The suited fellow, likely just Mark from accounting, walking her back from a client lunch. Her bright laughter, relief after a stressful meeting, not joy in a new love. Sterling, shattered by his first misunderstanding, had returned seeking, what? Forgiveness? Reconciliation? Hope? And seeing her seemingly happy and settled, he'd misinterpreted it completely, believing he was setting her free from his chaos once more. He'd sacrificed his own chance at closure, just as she had clung to her false narrative of abandonment. Their mutual misunderstanding had been catastrophic and complete, a double tragedy born of pride, pain, and terrible timing. The weight of this new revelation was staggering. He hadn't moved on easily. He'd carried the weight of their failure just as she had. He'd loved her enough to come back, and loved her enough to walk away a second time, believing it was best for her. Vivienne looked from the postcard in her trembling hand to Sterling's cottage, where Sarah was now leaving, giving Sterling a brief wave before walking towards a sleek car parked further down the lane. Sterling stood in the doorway, watching her go, his silhouette etched with that familiar, quiet sadness. The burden of truth Aunt Agatha spoke of wasn't just hers, it belonged to Sterling too, and he deserved to be free of it. Ignoring Elliot's voice still faintly calling from the phone clutched in her other hand, Vivienne Rhodes took a deep, shuddering breath, squared her shoulders, and walked back towards Sterling Ward's cottage. This time she didn't stop at the gate. She walked straight up the path, through the gentle rain, and knocked firmly on his door. The rain, a persistent drizzle now, plastered strands of hair to Vivienne's forehead as she stood on Sterling's doorstep. The cold seeped through her coat, but it was nothing compared to the icy dread and desperate hope warring within her. Behind the solid wood door lay the man whose life she had shattered twice, once with careless cruelty, and again with a careless laugh seen from afar. The faded postcard burned in her pocket, Sterling's agonized question echoing Agatha's warning. "What you do with the truth is your burden now." She knocked. The sound was too loud in the quiet lane, startling a bird from the dripping ivy. Silence stretched, thick and heavy. Then, footsteps, slow, deliberate. The handle turned, and the door opened. Sterling Ward stood framed in the doorway. The years had etched themselves onto his face, fine lines around his eyes that spoke of concentration and sorrow, threads of silver stark against his dark hair, a guarded stillness replacing the restless energy she remembered. But the eyes, those deep, expressive eyes widened in shock, then instantly shuttered, clouded with a complex storm of emotions, disbelief, a flare of raw anger, a flicker of profound pain, and beneath it all, an unmistakable, treacherous longing. He looked older, harder, yet achingly familiar. Vivienne. Her name on his lips was a low rasp, devoid of warmth, stripped bare of any welcome. He didn't move to let her in. His gaze swept over her, taking in her rain-slicked dishevelment, the shadows under her eyes mirroring his own, the absence of a wedding band he wouldn't know to look for. "What the hell are you doing here?" The hostility in his voice was a physical barrier. Vivienne flinched but held her ground. This was the consequence. This was the weight. She had flown across an ocean, abandoned her fiancé, shattered her safe life, driven by a truth so painful it threatened to consume her. She owed him this vulnerability, this exposure. She wouldn't flinch. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice trembling despite her resolve. "Please? It's raining." It was a feeble plea, echoing his own desperate hope years ago over cheap pasta. He hesitated, his jaw tightening. His gaze flickered past her, perhaps searching for a reason, an excuse to send her away. Seeing only the rain and the empty lane, his shoulders slumped infinitesimally. He stepped back, a silent, reluctant invitation. Not welcome, but cessation of immediate exile. The cottage interior was warm, smelling faintly of wood smoke, turpentine, and old paper. Bookshelves overflowed. Art, stunning, evocative pieces Vivienne recognized as Leo Vale's signature style, leaned against walls and covered surfaces. It was a creative haven, yet permeated by the same quiet melancholy she'd seen through the window. He didn't offer her a seat. He stood near the crackling fire, arms crossed, a fortress unto himself. "Talk," he commanded, his voice still rough. "And make it quick, Sarah's due back." The lie was transparent, a flimsy shield. Vivienne took a shaky breath, the warmth of the room doing nothing to thaw the ice in her veins. She met his guarded gaze, forcing herself not to look away. This was the crucible. "I saw it, Sterling," she began, the words rushing out before courage failed. "Our last argument, not how I remembered it, not how I told myself it happened for 7 years." She swallowed hard, the memory of the Locket's vision as vivid as the flames before her. "I saw it, through your eyes." His posture stiffened, a flicker of confusion joining the storm in his eyes. "What are you talking about?" "A locket, an old family thing. Agatha gave it to me." Vivienne pulled the cold, tarnished silver heart from her pocket, holding it up briefly. She said it showed one glimpse, a pivotal moment of romantic regret. From the other side, she saw the recognition flash in his eyes at Agatha's name, the wary disbelief deepening. "I used it last night, on the eve of my wedding." His gaze snapped to hers, sharp and assessing. "Your wedding? Was..." Vivienne corrected softly, the word heavy with consequence. I couldn't." She pushed on, the dam breaking. "I saw your apartment, the rain, you, making pasta, hoping. I felt your hope, Sterling, and then I arrived." She closed her eyes for a second, the echo of her own voice a lash. "I heard myself, I saw myself through your eyes. Sharp, impatient, dismissive, contemptuous." The shame was scalding. "I felt your despair when I belittled your dreams, when I called them pathetic, when I told you to stop dreaming and face reality." She opened her eyes, tears blurring her vision, but she kept them locked on his. "I felt it, Sterling, the exact moment my words. Maybe you'll actually achieve something when you stop dreaming and face reality, Sterling." Landed, like a killing blow. I felt your heart break. I felt your utter conviction that I saw you as worthless, that I didn't love you. She was crying freely now, the tears hot and unrestrained. "I saw you pack. I saw you leave the key. I saw you walk into the rain believing I didn't love you." Her voice cracked. "And I realized I was the villain, not you. All these years, I told myself you abandoned me because you were chaotic, because you couldn't commit, because you didn't love me enough to stay. It was a lie. A lie I told myself to avoid facing my own cruelty, my own failure to see you, to see your hope, your love, offered in that stupid plate of pasta." She took a step closer, needing him to understand the depth of her remorse. "I was wrong, Sterling. So terribly, unforgivably wrong. I was cruel. I was blind. And I broke us. I broke you. I am so desperately, utterly sorry." The apology hung in the air, raw and trembling, a confession 7 years too late. Sterling hadn't moved. He stood rigid, his face a mask, but his eyes were windows to a churning sea of pain. The carefully constructed walls were cracking. He looked away, staring into the fire, his throat working. The silence stretched, thick with the weight of her words and the roar of the rain against the windows. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, gravelly, stripped raw. "I came back, Viv." The words were quiet bombshells. "A year later, after I'd crawled through hell, after I'd finally sold a few pieces, scraped together the fare." He finally met her gaze, his own filled with an old deep ache. "I came back to our town, haunted the old places, the bridge." He paused, the memory vivid, painful. "Saw you, walking out of that fancy office building, laughing, bright, alive. With some suited bastard." Vivienne's breath hitched. "Mark, just Mark. You looked happy, settled, everything you'd ever said you wanted." A bitter, humorless twist touched his lips. Stability, predictability, someone who faced reality. He spat the last words, echoing her own long-ago condemnation. "I thought, good, she's happy. She got what she needed. She doesn't need my mess, my dreams." He looked back at the fire, his profile etched with remembered agony. "So I left, again, believing I was freeing you from me." He ran a hand over his face, the gesture weary. The anger, the pain, it fueled the work. Leo Vale was born from the ashes of Sterling Ward, from the belief that I was fundamentally unlovable, that my dreams were pathetic. He glanced at the locket still clutched in her hand. "Agatha, she told me about that thing, years ago, warned me it showed harsh truths, truths that could break you. I never dared." He looked back at her, his gaze piercing. "But you did, on the eve of your wedding, a flicker of something like awe mixed with the pain. You saw that, and you walked away from your safe life? To come here, to tell me?" Vivienne nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. "Truth doesn't erase years, Vivienne," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "It doesn't magic away the scars. It doesn't undo walking away twice." He gestured vaguely around the cottage, at the successful life built on a foundation of heartbreak. This is the life built on believing I wasn't enough, that my love was a burden. That's a weight that doesn't just vanish because you say sorry." The words were a necessary cold splash. He wasn't offering absolution. He wasn't rushing to embrace her. The hurt ran deep, bone deep, shaped by years of solitude and self-doubt she had authored. Her apology, while necessary, wasn't a key to unlock the past. "I know," Vivienne whispered, her voice thick with tears she refused to let fall now. She wiped her cheeks roughly. "I don't expect it to vanish. I don't expect anything. Not forgiveness, not us." The words were hard to say, but true. "I needed you to know the truth, the whole truth, that I did love you, fiercely, messily, stupidly, that I was wrong, so devastatingly wrong. And that walking away from you, letting you walk away believing that lie, is the single greatest regret of my life." She took a shuddering breath, the finality settling upon her. "I owed you that, and I owed myself the courage to face it." She straightened her shoulders, the weight of her confession shifting, becoming something she could finally carry. "Goodbye, Sterling." She turned to leave, the cold air from the open door beckoning. She had done what she came to do. The burden was shared. The path back to, well, whatever was left of her life, lay ahead, empty and uncertain. "Vivienne," his voice stopped her at the threshold. She turned back. He was looking at her, really looking, as if seeing her for the first time, not the ghost of his memory, not the cruel phantom from the Locket's vision, but the rain-soaked, tear-streaked woman who had just torn her world apart to deliver a truth 7 years overdue. The raw anger had bled away, replaced by a profound, weary sadness and something else, a dawning, fragile understanding. "The locket," he said quietly, his gaze dropping to the tarnished silver heart still in her hand. Agatha warned me, said it showed unvarnished truth, harshest thing there is. He met her eyes again. Seeing you here, knowing what you saw, knowing you walked away from everything, just to say this. He paused, searching for the words. It changes the weight. It doesn't erase the years, but it changes the weight of them. He didn't move towards her. He didn't open his arms. But he uncrossed his own, letting them fall loosely at his sides. He glanced at the rain sheeting down outside, then back at her, standing shivering on his doorstep. "Come in," he said, his voice low but clear. Not an invitation to the past, but an opening to something else. "It's raining." He gestured vaguely towards the interior, beyond the small entryway, towards the worn armchairs by the fire, the kitchen table. "We have a lot to unpack. Years' worth." It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation. It wasn't a promise. It was simply an acknowledgement. An acknowledgement of the shared, brutal truth now lying exposed between them. An acknowledgement that the weight of those lost years, while immense, had shifted. And an acknowledgement that the story wasn't necessarily over. It was just beginning again from a place of painful, terrifying honesty. Vivienne hesitated for only a heartbeat. Stepping back into the cottage felt like stepping off a cliff into unknown, turbulent waters. The safe shore of her life with Elliot was gone, receding into the stormy distance. Ahead lay only uncertainty, the deep, unhealed wounds of the past, and the man who embodied both her greatest regret and her most profound, reawakened longing. But the truth was in, the burden was shared, and sometimes the only way forward is through the storm. She stepped back over the threshold, closing the heavy door against the drumming rain. The warmth of the cottage enveloped her, smelling of smoke and turpentine and the faint, lingering scent of sterling soap. He didn't touch her. He simply turned and walked towards the kitchen, leaving her to follow. Vivienne moved slowly, her legs unsteady. Her gaze fell on the sturdy wooden table by the window. She walked towards it, the surface cluttered with sketchbooks, pencils, a half-empty mug. A place where new stories were drawn. Carefully, deliberately, she placed the cold, tarnished silver locket onto the worn wood. It lay there, dull and inert, its single devastating truth finally released. Its magic was spent, its burden shared. She looked towards the kitchen doorway, where Sterling stood waiting, his expression unreadable but no longer closed. The rain lashed the windows, a constant reminder of the past and the storm they had weathered, separately and now, perhaps, together. The path forward was terrifyingly uncertain, fraught with the ghosts of harsh words and mischances, scarred by years of misunderstanding and regret. It wouldn't be easy. It might not even work. But it was real. Vivienne took a deep, shuddering breath, the scent of wood smoke and possibility filling her lungs, and walked towards the kitchen, towards the unknown future, leaving the locket and the lie it shattered behind her on the table. Enjoyed the story? Like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss the next one.